My name is Larry Breckenridge. I'm the newest member of the board of the Mont Vernon Library Charitable Foundation, and I'll be kind of emceeing this event tonight. We're going to try to keep things fairly unstructured because everyone's time is valuable. We want to focus on the questions that you want to be answered, not the questions we perceive you need to be informed about. So we'll do some introduction, and then after that, we'll just respond to specific questions as they come up and address some of the issues that have been bouncing around, particularly on the Mont Vernon Chatter Facebook page, or any other questions you have about the project, its current state, its current funding, and all of the other factors. So we're going to start off with a video that we produced on the Charitable Foundation for a fundraiser, a very successful fundraiser that we did early in the fall, the One for the Books charity auction.
Our purpose is to help our community grow. And that's not just our community, that's how libraries are changing.
We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. Holy, holy, holy. Will you say your name for me?
All libraries across the country and the world have changed, as things do change with the time.
I think that if you haven't been to the library in the last 30 years, you don't know what modern libraries are all about.
My family's been involved with this library for as long as I can remember. I am involved with a lot of the programs. I'm involved with the Harry Potter camp I volunteer for. I volunteer for the summer reading program, and I also try and volunteer for any events I'm available to.
I like to just sit down and read, and I like the, what's it called, Rescue Princesses, I guess? And then Spy School is over there. A bigger children's room. I feel like I've read most of the books that I want to read in here, so like I'm reading new ones or going to Amherst Library.
Our library is a beautiful library, and I do love it. I love old things. It's so small and limited in its access. It's really quite difficult to get in. You know, it's not ideal. A parent can't change a diaper, for instance. We just don't even have the basic necessities. So people that know, if they see a lot of cars, they just know, oh, I can't use the library today. Welcome to the Dalen Memorial Library. Come on in and we'll give you a little tour. In our entranceway, we normally have books waiting for pickup. Over here, we have our costume corner also. It's going to be in our Harvest Market sale. There's no privacy here for lunch. I try to avoid lunch because I don't like it. This is our little kitchen. The staff room. It's a small refrigerator and our teapot. I can't do anything in the sink. You don't drink the water, and it's hard to clean up. I do a lot of art programs. Since we can't build out, there's no more space to go out. You see that we're wall to wall. We use every inch we can. We go up for storage.
I am a library assistant here at the Dalen Memorial Library. I have lived here in Mont Vernon my whole life. I just love the people. The people here are just so kind and talk. Lots of chatting. It's the place to be if you need to spill some tea. There's no space for us. There's no staff space, no teen space. Kids take up the whole room, adults take up the whole room. If you have any sort of programming, there's no library.
We were gifted with a $1 million gift at the passing of one of our patrons. We've also raised a lot of money. There were 54 of our first donors gave $1,000 to get the ball rolling. The new space, I think will have multiple areas for multiple uses at the same time.
I'm a resident 13 years, and I have kids in the Mont Vernon Village School. My kids could use a bigger space to hang out in. They're getting older. I would love for them to have a place to, safe space to have reading time and be able to do their homework with friends if they need to, or just a safe space for them to go.
There is absolutely no space for teens, and in the new building they get a whole room to themselves, which is up to date with technology. I would love to pick that up in the new building because I click with the teens very well. That's kind of always been my spot, but there's just nowhere for them right now, which is really unfortunate.
The new space would be just so great for our family and others in town. I can't wait to come to a library where I can go and check out books in a room that is primarily for adults and sit in a cozy chair and read while my children might be in the children's room finding their own books.
It would be nice because the homeschool group I did could like meet there when it's raining, and Girl Scouts could maybe meet there instead of the fire station half the time.
A new space would be amazing. There'd be more places for us to read, more places for us to go. I'm assuming more places for books, a lot more places for book clubs, more room for activities and events the library puts on. I think the library is very involved with the community and helps it out a lot. And I think it's the least they deserve.
So we're going to start with some introductions of the team. One of the advantages of coming here tonight is you've got a tremendous breadth of different people who've been working on the project for many years. So we've got the Mont Vernon Library trustees, we've got members from the building committee here, we've got non-voting advisors. They're all in the room right now. Also in the room, we have a 1,189-page document of the details of the building and the entire drawing set and the diagrams you see on the back table. If you have any question from the foundation to the roof, we can, this group of people here can answer it for you. So we can move maybe to the next slide. And you're going to hear from quite a few of us here on this list. We have people from the Sophia Dalen Trust here to talk about what the trust is and what it contributes to and what it cannot pay for. And we have people on the Mont Vernon Library Charitable Foundation like myself and Cindy and others who have been dutifully raising money for this project for a good long time. And we don't have anyone from the architects here, but they did give us, oh, we do, sorry, yes. Sorry, excellent. We have representatives from the architects here, and they provided us a lovely free gift, which is a three-dimensional rendering of the library on the land in the back corner, which I think you should check out. And we also have representatives from Turnstone here who can answer any of the questions that may come up. We're going to switch who talks based on whose expertise is best suited for the question at hand. So the ideal thing is that you'd bring up the questions that you have. We have an interactive presentation where we can click on a whole bunch of different places and go to them. And if no one's interested in a particular topic, we can save everyone's time and simply skip it. So don't be shy. If there's something you want to talk about, if you want me to just go through the list, I'll be happy to do that in order that they're presented here. But we wanted to make it an interactive question and answer session. What's the difference between last year and this year? So the main difference between last year and this year, for my standpoint, is a certain degree of urgency. And one of the big differences between last year and this year is that this year, if the town does not approve the appropriations, a very large amount of other people's money goes away. And it goes away in an irrevocable sort of way. You know, we have the $1 million bequest from the Conyers family, and we have the National Endowment for the Humanities grant. Those are contingent on a certain start date. And so the first thing that happens is a lot of other people's money doesn't get spent in Mont Vernon. Really great fundraising events. Just this summer and early fall, I think we raised another $120,000. 240, I was off. So over $240,000. So, you know, the fundraising has been relentless. We just finished a grant application just a few days ago. It's been a continuous process trying to reduce the total price that the town has to pay. Can anybody else think of anything that has changed since then? This is Christine. She'll be talking a lot tonight.
Yeah, we've also been going through some value engineering exercises with the contractor that we've selected, Turnstone, and they've actually been doing a tremendous amount of work with us to bring the prices of this project down without us having paid them a penny so far. So they're very committed to this project. It's a great company. We feel really great about them, and we're really excited to do this.
So along with that previous question, what has changed in the design? Because last year, at town meeting and leading up to it, people were saying it was too big. What did you guys do to listen to the townspeople and make it smaller?
So I think the best way to answer this question is to start by talking about why it is so big, and then we can back out from there. There's some helpful slides that can work to get this point across for us. The most significant difference in commercial buildings since the existing library was built is the Americans with Disabilities Act, which was passed in 1990. Completely changes the way that public space is used. There are really specific requirements on, it's mainly based around wheelchair users, but it's really for anybody with any kind of mobility issues. I think everyone here is familiar with ramps, seeing ramps added, elevators added, chairlifts added. It's a lot more significant than that. Every aisle you're walking down, imagine you're going through the stacks, minimum of 3 feet wide. There can't be any dead ends in hallways. You need to accommodate a 5-foot diameter wheelchair radius. There are other stipulations on approaches to doors, how much clearance there needs to be on the side of a door, how wide doors need to be. That dictates hallway size. There's also life safety codes that have been enacted that affect hallway size as well, forms of egress, circulation. So we did a couple of studies that will maybe help visually understand this a little bit better. This is our existing library right now, exactly as it's set up. We did a study that looked at what would we get if we made our existing library ADA compliant. This is not addressing the ramps outside or any kind of getting into the building. This is just the building interior itself. What happens is you lose half the collection and most of the seating space. And possibly a more impactful diagram is if we were to take the program that we have in our existing library right now, and if we could somehow magically swell the walls of that building to accommodate the program we have exactly as it is, and by program I mean the number of collections we have, the amount of seating we have, how much bigger would that building be? And the answer is 57%. So you'll see 3-foot dimensions noted in a couple of areas. That's just for reference, so you can kind of wrap your head around the scale. So this is allowing for 3 feet around all of the stacks. It's allowing for that wheelchair radius. You're seeing the existing floor plan underlaid on or underneath the oversized floor plan, so it's a little bit jumbled together. But these dashed lines, those circles, that's the 5-foot wheelchair radius. So really, before we make any changes, any increases to our program, our offerings at all, we're already 57% bigger than we were before. So in order to make any meaningful change, we're talking about going a lot bigger. So that's why it's so big. Yeah, do you want to add to that?
So one of the things we want to point out is the majority of people who went to town meeting last year voted yes on this. We fell shy of the 60% required to pass a bond. So a lot of people in the town are comfortable with the size of the library. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things about a smaller library. And one of them is a smaller library is not necessarily a cheaper library. One of the things that you struggle with in any sort of construction, especially in the modern age, is economy of scale, where you have one foundation, you have one roof, you have one HVAC system, you have all of the electrical, you have many things that once you scale them down, they don't really get cheaper. So one of the challenges in responding to comments from town meeting last year where people were saying we want a smaller library is a smaller library isn't a cheaper library. You just lose capabilities and lose capacity to grow for the future, and you lose space that you need. Like, do you give up the kitchen? Do you give up the community room? Do you give up the children's library collection? Do you give up space for the staff to work? You know, these are the sacrifices you make for very small changes in total cost. So one of the things that we did to try to respond to those comments, because we're trying to respond and get what the town wants, is to work really hard to raise more money. And the idea was you could raise more money, you could control the inflation, you could bring down the cost and get the library what it needs with a lower total cost for the town, which is really the only goal of someone who would say, I want a smaller building, is that they want a smaller cost. So we're responding to the cost side of things. So one fun little exercise.
There was one other thing I wanted to add about the why we didn't just go and make a new design. And that's because really, really massive cost involved in getting to this point. or massive, comparatively. And what Larry was saying about what we would save in making the building smaller would likely be eaten up in any cost, or with any cost we spend on trying to redesign. Because in order to get to a drawing set that can give you an accurate price, something that we feel comfortable and confident bringing to town meeting, you have to design the whole building. You have to produce a 1,000-page spec book and 80 pages of drawings, and it takes a lot of hours, and a licensed architect has to do it. So it's not really an easy thing to go back and redesign, and so we heard those people and we talked about what made the most sense, and we think what makes the most sense is trying to stick with the design that we have.
So one fun little exercise I did today to kind of move on to another point, the Wilton Library was built in 1906 and 1907 in Wilton. I don't know if anyone's ever been there. I used to live in Wilton before I moved to Mont Vernon. It's a 6,000 square foot library built 120 years ago for 1,900 citizens in Wilton. So a 6,700 foot library for a larger town in the 21st century, this is actually pretty on par for what the needs are and historically accurate. You know, the modern library has to do more than a library did back in 1907, and people ask more of their libraries now than they did back then.
Did you examine the cost of just expanding the current library, and how does that compare to the cost for a new one?
The question was, did we look at expanding the current library? The answer is yes, and it's not possible. The lot's not big enough. The water has always been an issue. We can't actually get clean, potable water there. Is that correct? No? It's that there's wetlands on the site. Apologies, this happened before I was added to the building committee. So that has been looked at. It's unfortunately not possible. But the town owns the building and plans to use it, make use of it.
So one more aspect about the design and the current design is also the design that won the NEH grant, the National Endowment for the Humanities grant. So one of the issues of accepting $655,000 in basically free money for the town is that we used this design to win that grant. And it's contingent and connected. So when you look at redesigning and going smaller, what you're doing, you're stepping away from that grant money, you're redesigning the entire project, you're not really saving that money. It's a net negative to take this building and make it 10% or 20% smaller in terms of not just total cost to the town. So we just tried to raise more money on the charitable foundation side, and we're quite successful. So more questions?
All right. It seems frequently when we ask a question, any of us ask a question of any member of the committee, the answer we get is, it's way more expensive. It just costs more. How about some dollars? How much does it really cost to have the plans?
So I looked up the total cost that's been spent to date on plans and permitting, and probably not all of it is money that would have to be respent. But the town has voted to spend over $300,000 on design and permitting work in the last 5 years. And you would be not necessarily starting over, but certainly a lot of that would be money that would then become wasted rather than invested.
Yeah, it's not an inexpensive thing to do. What we can do is talk about average cost per square foot, but they range quite a bit. So unfortunately, the only way to give specific answers in dollar amounts is to actually redesign the building. And then find out if it was worth reinvesting hundreds of thousands more to try to make it smaller.
Are you saying that we would lose the $655,000 for the NEH grant because it wouldn't apply to a different library, and we would have to spend another a little bit less than $300,000 to get a new set of plans? So we're getting close to $1 million there in order to have a look at what a smaller building would do for us, and that might not save us much money.
Correct. That's a very succinct way of putting it. Thank you.
The other issue is we're really close to the deadline on the $1 million donation, and that time clock would also roll out. So we might be down another $1 million. Plus, oh yes, we also have a grandfathered wetlands permit for our particular design. And so we would reopen the whole question of the wetlands permit, which we worked hard to acquire, and that would create additional studies and additional costs and additional complications. So, you know, yes? Oh, okay. Yep, the $1 million donation is tied to this design also.
And this design is a legacy building, meaning it is designed to serve the community for the next 100 years.
Okay, yeah. So all of the like the biggest amounts of other people's money is tied to this design, and the idea is to give us a building. You know, Sophia Dalen went out and using money that she earned by farming. I don't know if any of you do gardening in Mont Vernon, but the idea of earning money from farming in Mont Vernon seems kind of staggering. She created this beautiful building that's lasted 100 years. You know, this is our opportunity to, in this room and in this town, to build something that will last for the next 100 years, that will give this town another wonderful public building. I'm convinced that America is not done building beautiful public buildings, and that America should continue to build great things. And this is an opportunity where we use 2/3 of charitable donations or government funds to build something beautiful with these beautiful plans.
What does the committee feel is a reasonable ask for each household to support this, seeing the 20-year bond and the interest, along with the other incremental costs, which could be the road enhancement and the fire system?
We'll go to question number 10, how will this affect my taxes? So we don't want to give the answer, it depends all the time, because it gets really frustrating, but it does depend on a few things. We are still raising money. The total ask, I'm trying to find the right page of my notes here. So bond rates are important. They've been pretty volatile lately. We did a calculation with a bond rate of 6%. And it looks like right now we would have to ask the town for $2.14 million at town meeting. However, there are some end of the year bequests that people like to make. It's a very popular, so that is flexible and can be adjusted even right up to the day of the town meeting. As you've seen several times, sometimes you vote to increase or decrease an ask. So what number did you have? So the price for okay, here it is. All right. So we're estimating, based on these numbers, 54 cents per $1,000 valuation, which runs to about $161 per year on a house valued at $300,000, which we think is roughly equivalent to how much Milford charges a Mont Vernon resident for an out-of-town annual library card. So bigger houses obviously end up paying more, and smaller houses end up paying less. And this is how New Hampshire has chosen to fund things, so there's no offset for property taxes or business taxes in this town. Property taxes are the only way that we raise money.
What term bond issue is that for?
So that was basically just...
Yes.
So Larry's using the numbers from last year at town meeting because, as we said on the slide, the real answer to this question is it depends, and it depends on several variables. So it's very difficult to stand here before you and give you a number that anybody can really count on. And the last thing I ever want to do is mislead you. So what I want to tell you is it depends. We have challenged Turnstone to work with DSK and the Library Building Committee to make sure that any increases in cost due to inflation, because it's been a year, or will have been a year, by the time we get to town meeting in '24, since those numbers were gotten from those were based on actual bids. So over the course of a year and many years, those costs would be expected to go up. So what we challenged Turnstone, DSK, and the building committee to do was to find cost savings to offset the cost increases that might occur during the year. And I think they've done a really good job of being very creative and spending a lot of time together. Turnstone has been tremendously committed. They have helped us. They have not sent us a bill for anything all year. They have spent ridiculous amounts of time. Stacy, the president, is sitting here tonight with us, and she answers my questions by email and text with alarming speed. Aaron from DSK has, I'm pretty sure, spent way more than we have been charged for on this entire project throughout its history. So we really are in their debt for the work that's been done. My understanding is that they feel like they will be successful in offsetting those costs. The other thing that we've done is identify some things that can be deferred, and I know that that can be misconstrued, so I want to speak very clearly. We are not deferring things that need to be part of the library that we will then come back to town meeting the year after and say, oh, we need another $100,000 for all that stuff we deferred. What we're looking at are the things that could be either eliminated forever or not done as part of the construction of the building. The initial design included a full landscape package. There are some parts of that package that must be done as you're doing the building because they're the hardscape. It's the pavers that are the floor of the porch and patio. You need those along with the building. But you don't need every flower, shrub, and tree. That's part of the plan. If you don't need the children's garden, it's part of the plan. So by looking at deferring those things, two things could happen. One could be that after we actually are far into the construction process, the town has a contingency. Turnstone has a contingency. Turnstone also allowed for escalation in the cost because of the pandemic and the supply chain issues. There's been a lot more volatility in some of that pricing than they normally have to predict for. So all that money is being held, and if we get into construction and figure out that we didn't need to spend it because the prices didn't go up, we didn't hit more ledge than we thought, we didn't strike water that needs to be dewatered as part of the construction process, some of that funding could be put back into things that had been deferred. So we could say, hey, it's August, we're done the site work, things are looking good, we can buy the trees with money that's still in the project without going back to the town, without changing the overall cost of the project. The other thing that could happen is that the Mont Vernon Library Charitable Foundation originally envisioned disbanding the minute that this project passed, but we've learned that there are ways to raise money that are relatively painless. One of them is through our partnership with New Hampshire Charitable Gaming. We've raised over $60,000 this year, pretty much by not doing much, but asking all of you to, hey, maybe go on the nights that we're sponsoring at the casino in Manchester. We can continue to do that in future years and fund some of those things that were deferred at no additional ask to the taxpayers. It's also a great way to potentially refresh technology and other things that we've traditionally either had to budget for or ask the Dayland Trust to fund. So, that was a great win for the whole town, us discovering that opportunity. Do we think I answered the question?
Yep. So, and one other thing I want to add is this is a $6 million library that will cost the town $2 million. And that's just a heck of a great deal, right? Yes?
When you were rolling over the ADA compliances in last year's design, were they, in this design, were they in last year's design? And then secondly, is the road and the sprinkler system not in this $2.14 million, which as you said, last year's numbers? So what else is not in there? And again, answer me if those two items are in that number also.
Okay, let's start with the ADA question, which is obviously a question for Christine.
Yes, that was part of the plan last year. So it's going to be part of any plan we consider. It's a requirement by code. So there's no ambiguity there. It has to be done. It could not be stamped by an architect without adhering to those codes, both ADA and life safety.
I promised I wasn't going to talk too much tonight, but one of the things I did want to say is that my very favorite part of this design is the fact that it's not only ADA compliant, but it is really fully welcoming. There is not a ramp at the back. There is not a wheelchair lift you have to use and find and get somebody to turn on for you. It is fully welcoming. It is all on one level. There is no impediment to somebody in a wheelchair. And, we have people who,
need that wheelchair access, but we also have a lot of moms with strollers. This is all at one level. It's going to be incredibly different than what we face today in the current library.
So, John, do you want to answer the question about the roads? We also have slides for the road.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. John Quinlan, your selectman. As far as the access road is concerned, just a little history. The whole parcel was purchased by the town in 1997. Basically, space for a new library and space for a new cemetery. So the town purchased it, basically using mostly funds from the cemetery trustees, trust funds, as well as the library's trust funds, and a portion from the town as well. Now, when we started talking about, again, this is a 25-year project we're talking from 1997. There's been steady progress. There were past attempts to build a library. As we progressed through the late 2000s and the 2010s, there were many discussions on the select board about how this would be handled. The cemetery, obviously, would have full responsibility for building a new cemetery. The library trustees would have full responsibility for building a new library. The selectmen discussed it and always assumed, because these are greater town projects that benefit the entire town, that it would be the town's responsibility to build a road that connects the two to the main road. So that's where that concept comes from. It's always been there. The individual trustees would work on their individual projects, but the town would deal with the road access issue. And that is why it's not the library's responsibility to build the access road. It's not the cemetery trustees' responsibility to build the access road. This is something that we've known for 15 plus years. Nothing's changed. We don't expect the library trustees to pay for it. We don't expect the cemetery trustees to pay for it. It's something that the town at large, because these are essentially town projects that benefit all of us. The town and the select board is always assuming that the town responsibility, so it will be a separate warrant submitted by the select board.
I've got one question. Isn't there a fine associated with failing to develop the cemetery in time, a state fine?
I personally can't answer that. I don't know. Okay. But I know that cemetery trustees are looking to begin construction on the new portion of the library at the top of the hill, probably within a 4 to 5 year time frame. So they're already in the process where they've actually started doing some ground penetrating radar studies of what the ground and the ledge looks like underneath that hill. And also, some of you probably aren't too familiar with that piece of property. We all know the cornfield, but what you don't realize is that 2/3 of that property is actually the woods to the right, and it belongs mostly to the cemetery trustees. So they're in the process of mapping that out, seeing where the issues are with ledge, water, etc. Because these plans, both for the library and for the cemetery, are very long-term town projects. And again, I don't know anything about penalties as far as the cemetery. Unfortunately, one of them is not here tonight.
So we also answer the question about the sprinklers.
Sprinkler.
Great. I'm Bill McKinney. So the sprinklers are not included in this project again, and the reason for that is that they are not required. And based upon most recent pricing that we've received, the sprinkler system for this library as a want rather than a need would be between $300,000 and $350,000 on top of the cost of the library. Does it make sense to sprinkler the systems? I'm a pro sprinkler person, and I do think they make a lot of sense, but I'm also someone involved in the codes, and when the codes do not require it, why do you force somebody to spend that kind of money? So if the town chooses to sprinkle the building, then they could choose to have a separate warrant article to do that.
Quickly.
So a sprinkler system is one way of fire suppression. I imagine there are other ways of fire suppression, and this being a library, a sprinkler system, I can't imagine would be the ideal way for fire suppression because of all the books. Is there anybody here that can talk to what is part of the design as far as what makes the library safe without a sprinkler system as fire suppression? And what would the fire suppression be?
Sprinkler systems are proven to be very effective in extinguishing fires in an incipient stage, very small stage. However, sprinkler systems also have a history of causing significant damage by accidental activation, frozen pipes, vandalism. So yes, we've taken that into account as we've looked at the building. The building is less than 8,000 square feet. The occupancy load is less than 300, so sprinkler systems are not required. But instead, the library design includes an advanced fire alarm system, fire detection system for early warning to the fire department. You're not very far from the fire station here, and I know we're a call volunteer fire department here, so nobody's at the station, but they still do have a very good record of doing a great job in preventing damage to buildings. So if you get an early warning system in there that announces that there's smoke in the building, then maybe you're there before the actual fire breaks out. Yes, another question. Oh, are we happy? Okay.
It'd be great if you could let questions from the public. There's been a lot of discussion about people involved with the project, and it's pretty hard to ask questions right now. So I wanted to there's been two questions about changes to the plan. First was in regards to, is there a square footage change from last year to this year? And then a second question about ADA compliance. I'm looking for an explicit answer. I think you alluded to it, but there are no changes between the plan that was presented last year, the design of the building, the technical specs, and the building proposal as it stands this year. Is that correct?
That is correct. There are no changes. And I just want to, no, never mind.
Yeah, and earlier we discussed why there were no changes. The economies of scale and ADA compliance. Okay, so more fire suppression comments, I think, from the architect.
I'll just add one brief thing. The number one thing we worry about with fire protection is life safety. So that is really related to the number of egresses and exits from the building and making sure that that all works very quickly and easily once the fire alarm goes off. And so there are more exits from the building than required. And because it's all one story, it's very easy to do that, and they're all signed in that way. So that was just addressing the fire sprinkler question.
Okay, some more questions? Yes, Amanda?
I noticed a lot of concerns revolve around, does the cost have to do with furnishing the building? Is the inside furniture, lighting, all the small nitty-gritty soft costs, are those included in the 5.95 amount?
Yes, they are. So furnishings, equipment, everything we need to run this building is included in those costs. I believe that additional expanding the collection comes from a different source. I think that Bonnie or someone else can speak to that because that is not my expertise. But Cindy can speak to it. But yes, to answer your question, furnishings, everything that we need to operate this building is included in those costs.
Yeah, the way they described it to me, if you turned the building upside down and shook it, everything that falls out would be in the soft costs held by the town, and there's a whole list of those items. And everything that would stick is in the cost that Turnstone has provided in their bid. So all of those things are in there. The collection's a little different story in that the trustees of the trust funds actually hold a significant amount of money in smaller trust funds, not the library capital reserve, that are restricted just for use to buy books. And because the existing library is so small, we're basically one book out for every book in. A lot of those funds have been collecting nicely for many years, and there's more than adequate funding to increase the collection the amount that we would imagine in the new library.
You want the numbers? Does it matter? The trustee of the trust funds just shared. just what Cindy said, there's trust funds set up specifically for books. This was before the internet was invented. So a lot of these trust funds have been rolling and rolling and rolling. We can only spend the interest, but there's $21,248 set aside for new books. So in this design, I believe we have a 30 to 40% growth in the shelving. So we could either decide to delete some of the current collection to make it even more space available. We could take everything up with us and have this space to grow. There's also $59,943 that is set aside for library use. So thanks to the forward thinking of those people, you could use that for technology, you could use it for drapes. I mean, you could use it for almost anything, but we would want to hold that money for essentials that would not be charged to the taxpayer.
I know you said some of the numbers are still in the air. Do you know what the appropriation for the building portion of this is? Is that 5.95 million again?
So the way it works is that you have to raise the full amount of the project at town meeting through a warrant article, but the warrant article language also has extra clarifications that tell you where the money is coming from. So the full project cost, if Turnstone and DSK and the Library Building Committee are successful in holding the cost to the 2023 number, would be the 5.95 million for the project. What's actually asked of the town will be significantly less than that. If the vote were held tonight and that 2023 number held, then the ask to the town would be $2.14 million. But as I said, there's a bunch of variables that go into that. We certainly hope the number could even be lower than that, but depending on inflation and some of those other things, it could potentially be higher. So I don't want to mislead you by giving you a number and making you feel like Cindy promised this, but 2.14 would be what it was if Turnstone is successful in holding the cost today.
Yeah, I think the way the warrant article is structured is a little bit deceptive. It makes it sound like the town has to come up with $6 million, and it does not.
Yeah, so Turnstone is here tonight. I guess, do you have comments on how close you expect that to be?
So currently we're working within the budget. We've also looked at different materials, things of that nature, taking out maybe some bluestone in the landscaping that was there and providing a much more economical concrete stone patio that gives you the same look. So this committee has really committed to looking at all of those things, and right now we're gathering the cost perspective so that the committee can make a decision on which ones they want to include and which ones they would like to sort of take a cost savings on. We are not, so we will have this by, I think our target is January 15th, right? Isn't that? We're hoping to have it sooner than that, but it does take a lot of time and effort, and we also didn't want to do it too soon because we don't want costs, we don't want to give you a number that then changes by March. So what we do with that is we have what's called a construction management contingency within our budget, and we also have an escalation contingency. What we saw in 2021 was significant increase in costs that were happening on a monthly and daily basis. So we felt it was a responsible thing to do to include an amount of money within that budget so that when you ask for the money and something was raised, we could hit that contingency too. That is still in there, and from last year to this year we have seen prices level out. So it's not like we're seeing steel change every 15 days anymore, so we have a little bit more opportunity. The closer we get to January, the better off we are because a lot of pricing changes in January and in June. So we feel we're on the positive track, and we feel very good about the overall budget of the $5.95 million. This committee is committed to building this building for the $5.95 million. Certain things we're looking at that somebody might donate is some of the creative things that can be added later, which I think is a really important piece. Trees that could be donated at a future date, were taken out of our budget so that we make sure that we stay within this guideline. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, very much so.
Okay.
I just want to be clear. Many of these are my questions, but I'm also trying to pass along a lot of the questions that have come up. So because it came up, hopefully this is loud enough, contingencies, can you just explain, because of price volatility and other things, so everything today looks good, 5.95 looks good.
Yeah.
Something happens again, whatever
Yeah.
that might be, everything gets approved in March, construction starts, steel goes way up. Can you explain what happens? What is?
Yeah, so, and I don't hold me to the numbers in terms of how I'm explaining this. I'm going to use simple numbers. If we held in our budget steel at 100,000, but pricing went up, and when we went back out for final pricing, it went to 120,000. And we have $250,000 in price escalation contingency. We would increase the steel line item to 120,000, and we would decrease the escalation contingency available from 250 to 230. We account for these things on a line item by line item basis, so that the committee or whoever's responsible for the payments can see where things went up, where things went down. Sometimes we actually do better on a line item. It happens that way, when we're budgeting. And actually on this job, we actually hard bid this set of plans and specifications. So a little different than other public buildings that you might see that's not fully designed, but we hard bid this, and we actually got, say, 3 mechanical contractors to bid on it, and we reviewed the scopes of work and picked the most responsible bidder from that. So all of those things are within our budget.
What does hard bid mean?
Hard bid means, so there's a full design on the mechanical, and so somebody has given us a number to provide and install that entire mechanical system. If we didn't have that design, somebody would say, well, based on our experience, it may cost this. But if we had passed this in March of last year, we would have been able to move forward with the numbers that we had. We would not have had to rebid it or wait for design to then bid it again. So a little bit different. So I'm not going to direct questions.
Keep up the great questions. We're loving them. So
one more question regarding, so you covered the contingencies well. Everyone hopes it doesn't come to this. If the contingency or the escalation were exhausted, let's say costs went up so high, what would happen then? Does Turnstone lose money, or does the town need to provide more money to finish the building?
Well, I think one of the first steps is that the Mont Vernon Library Charitable Foundation would reach out to all the donors who have been so generous and so supportive thus far to cover the override as a first line of defense. And the town, okay, I'll pass this on too. Oh, sorry.
Just that there are several layers of contingencies included in the pricing. We're also carrying one on our side in the soft costs as well. So we did that in an effort to, understanding that it was going to have an impact on the number that was going in front of everyone at town meeting. We really don't want this to cost more than we're saying it's going to cost. So we've padded it so that we can protect ourselves against that. And just to recap on to build on what Stacy was saying, and going back to that question that you asked, ma'am, I don't know your name, I'm sorry. It's a really valid question, and I wish there was a better answer to why we can't tell you exactly how much a plan is going to cost. If that were possible, our jobs would be so much easier in this industry that we work in. You can't reverse build a plan, you can't reverse design a plan to a certain budget. There are hundreds of factors in the pricing of a building. You pull on one end, it moves something else. It's just really, really challenging. And in order to have accurate numbers, you have to have a full set of plans. You have to invest in that. So
I'll Did I just turn this off by accident? Okay. Can everybody? Okay, there it is. I'll speak to your what happens if it goes over. So in March, the town votes this forward. We will then go out and reprice the entire job for people to anticipate having contracts immediately. We will know what those numbers are. We will know whether or not we're going to be over budget with the design or whether we're going to be under budget. The thing we don't know is what's in the ground. So once we get footings and foundations in, then we become pretty confident in what we can do. The way that we like to approach it is anything that can be added later in the project, we hold off on maybe ordering. So if there's, I don't want to take away something so special, but I'm trying to think of an example. So you have book stacks. There's some pretty elaborate wood trim that goes to those. That can be added later. So if we feel like we're tight on those things, we'll hold off on ordering those pieces that don't impact the structure per se of the building. As well, when we priced this, we priced it with a metal roof. A shingle roof is less expensive, but then the town has to decide in terms of maintenance, right? And when do we want to re-shingle? But that is an area where there could be savings, and we might hold off in the beginning on contracting with a metal roofer and wait to make sure that the budget can absorb those costs. So, okay.
I think that covers, yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about maintenance of the building because it was mentioned briefly. We have a unique situation for this building, and I was out holding this sign at the dump the Saturday before last, and transfer station, sorry, and people said, well, won't this cost more to maintain? And we have a wonderful thing called the Dalen Library Trust, and we have people on the trust here today, and they can talk about it. Where's Anne? Okay, if she wants to talk about maintenance and what the Dalen Trust can pay for.
Hi, the Dalen Trust pays for maintenance of the building. We paid for the improvements to the roof. We paid for improvements to the chimney, paid to have it painted. We paid for cleaning, electricity, telephone, pest control, mowing, plowing, and we are committed to do that by the terms of Sophia G. Dalen's will. She left money to build the building and to support it. So, and we are allowed to apply that money to a new building per the terms of the will. She was very forward-thinking for somebody in 1890. Does anybody have questions?
Does anyone? So this is relaying along more, but now that it's trust-related. So I'm going to try and get these right. But essentially, there were questions along the lines of the trust. The Dalen Trust is making a large contribution to the building. I guess. Do you want to clarify that amount, just so?
15 years ago, the Dalen trustees were different than they are today. There were 3 of us, and we pledged $750,000 to the construction of a new library. That library didn't pass, but the next thing that happened was the town bought the existing building, so it married the lot with the building. So that $105,000 got added to the $750,000. That money resides in CDs at the moment. And for 16 years, we've been matching any contribution the town made at town meeting. So that amount of money that you see in the town report is the library's money. The trust has given that away. I brought the trustees' financial report I received from Edward Jones today, and the trust currently has about $2.1 million.
Thank you. So then that gets into the next question, or one of the questions, which is after that contribution is made to the construction of the building, essentially what would remain in the trust, and would that be enough to continue to fund the maintenance and whatever else you have been doing on the existing building for the new structure?
So it would, depending on what happens with the market, it would leave about $1.3 million. And it should be plenty of money to take care of a new building. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars on oil in the old building because it has no insulation. This building will be very much energy efficient, and it may, due to some fundraising and some endeavors, have solar panels on the roof to take care of the electric bill. So we're very confident that we can maintain the building in the future.
And then there were also questions, so we've covered maintaining the building, and then there were questions about the grounds, and then road and parking lots. Those may go outside of your area, but you want to cover them?
The road is not part of the Dale and Trust's responsibility. That's a town problem. But the grounds of the library would be maintained by the trust, as would the parking lot and plowing and shoveling and that sort.
Will the old building, that's owned by the town? And will the town maintain that? They will maintain that building.
So we have a selectman here who can talk about the disposition and costs of the old building.
What you're saying is correct. Once the library actually moves lock, stock, and barrel up to the new building, the old building has already been purchased by the town, so it's officially already a town building. And the maintenance will fall on the town. As you know, we have a lot of old buildings in town. I think when and if the library passes, which I'm hoping for, our attention will then move on to the town hall, and we have to do a lot to, everyone's seen town hall. She's in tough shape. She needs some tender loving care. That's going to be the next big project, many years, to try and get that back up to code. But the building that is the library now will have a role to play in the future, because we're going to end up a lot, like I said, the town hall is going to have to be rebuilt. We're looking to put all the town offices in the town hall in the future. McCullum is going to be the sole domain of the police department. That needs interior work over the next several years. We will be using the old building, the old library building, for some kind of office, because there's going to be a couple of years where offices are moving around. They're going to need temporary space. Ultimately, there will either be a town office of some kind in the old building, or it will be used as a meeting space. But yes, it will default to the town. It'll be just like any of the other town buildings, which the town has to maintain separate from the Dale and Trust. No, that the maintenance will be, it'll fall under one of the maintenance lines we already have in the town government. It'd just be a little higher because we're adding another building.
So one important thing about the long-term vision of moving on to the town hall and continuing the infrastructure development and of any town is that I personally believe, and there's good evidence for it, that because we won some important government grants for the library, the town needs to show that we keep our promises. That if we want to then apply for a grant for the town hall or for other structures around town, the fact that we were able to deliver on our promises, we're able to win a grant and then start the project, is going to make it easier for us to get new grants. And conversely, we may not see a grant in our lifetime if we fail to live up to the expectations of the people who put all this public money forward. Politicians want to see this go all the way to groundbreaking, and they'll remember which towns didn't give them the opportunity to do so.
I'd like an estimate on the magnitude of the contingency. We've talked about that a lot, but we didn't hear a magnitude. Is it fair to say that the total contingencies are somewhere in the order of 10% of the $5.9 million? There's escalation and CM contingencies, and somebody talked about another one.
A little bit over 10%. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, a little bit over 10%. Okay. Yeah.
It was said earlier that both the the donation of a million and then a grant for 600 would end, we would lose access to them this year. I believe at the last session we had when the voting took place, or I'm not sure what it was, the same message was communicated. So was something done to continue those grants and continue the $1 million donation?
Yeah, I'll pass this off to other folks.
So I've seen that question come up, and I've been very careful when communicating this in the past, and that's why one of the reasons that I want to be really careful about any kind of numbers, whether it's a date or a dollar figure. The contingency in Sherry Conyers' will has not changed. It was always October 2024, and we've always clearly communicated that. I think at town meeting we definitely were hoping to start in 2023 because we have to get the thing done and other contingencies like the permits and all that stuff. It certainly would have been nice to start this year, but we never stood up and said the $1 million was going away on the day after town meeting in March. So I'm not sure where that got started. I checked the slide and there's nothing really done, and certainly nothing in writing says that. So if there was an implication that failing to pass it in March of 23 caused the gift to be lost, I apologize for that. It certainly was not intentional. The NEH is a little different story. We actually had to go back to them when it failed that town meeting and get permission to continue on for another year because the grant application certainly had been aimed at an approval in 2023. We were fortunate that NEH approved that. We're also very fortunate that they approved a waiver for what is called the Build America, Buy America Act, which kind of went through in the midst of all of this happening, which would have required us to buy all American steel and all American, all kinds of things, which is not a huge problem for some things, but it's a big problem for electrical components. So we were able to get a waiver from that because of the timing of the grant award and all of these things. So those were two really important things that NEH came through with since town meeting.
Okay, second question then.
The other question I was going to ask was the operating budget for the future library. So is there an operating budget for the next 10 years or 5 years, I don't know, a plan for salaries and things like that? I know there was an increase this year, and maybe that's in preparation for the new library. So just wanted to understand, based on the square footage, do we need additional staff or are we not going to need it? And has there been a comparison to like the Amherst Library staffing?
Okay, let me pass that question off.
So one of the things that often happens when you build a new library is that the town asks for services or hours of operation that haven't happened previously. That we have always said would be something that a bridge we would cross after the new library was open. The library design was designed specifically to allow it to operate with the same staffing that we have now. We're very fortunate to have the trust funds that will increase the collection and those kinds of things. We're really fortunate. I don't think that we say enough about the Dalen Trust. Our library is one of only 2 town libraries in the state that has no maintenance line, no utilities line in the town budget because the Dalen Trust covers all those things. So the only thing, largely, there's a few things that are in the budget, but the bulk of the library budget really is the salaries. So the staffing is very important, but the plan forward is that it will operate with the same staffing we have now, unless and until the town comes before town meeting and asks that it be increased. There's a lot of discussions about why it's only open 37 hours now, which I found kind of ironic because I spent a lot of time last year at the budget committee explaining why it is open as many as 37 hours. So it's a very different perspective to be asked why it's only open 37 hours. So I don't know. Pete?
Question regarding the hours. I understand there'll be a meeting room in the new library. There'll be a meeting room. Would it be anticipated that the meeting room could be used on hours that the library is not open? Would that be something the public or a public group would have access to, say on a weekend or something when the library is closed?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's actually one of the key things about the design. If you look at the floor plan, and I can pull it up in just a second here, we carefully designed it to make sure that the community room, the bathrooms, and the back hall are entirely separate from the base of the library, so that when the library is not open, those areas that a group using the community room didn't need access to can be closed off. So that was purposefully built into the design to allow that. I know that it's interesting to try to find meeting space in town for different size groups. You know, you can hear the HVAC in here. You didn't get to see us come in 2 hours early and have Larry have to run home and get his computer when mine didn't connect to the projector as well as it ought to. There's not a lot of great spaces to do presentation type meetings, and that's clearly one of the things that the program room is designed to do to support library programming, but it's also going to be a great resource for other people who want to do a presentation for a reasonable size. The meeting room is designed to hold 75 people, because if it was designed to hold 76, we'd have had to add another bathroom. So we decided not to do that. And I have to tell you that I was in a meeting in Wilton, and I paced off their meeting room, and it turned out to be exactly the same size as the space that we proposed, and there were 50 people at the meeting I was at. Karen Mitchell was there too, and we looked around and said, wow, that meeting room is not as big as you think it is. This is pretty tight with only 50 people in this room. So it's not a huge space, but it's going to be well equipped with the right kinds of equipment to make it a decent place to give a presentation.
Okay, some more questions?
Just one more clarification on the Conyers bequest. So I think earlier tonight you mentioned that that money is tied to groundbreaking in October of 2024. Is that the deadline for that money? Yes. Yeah. And I guess what constitutes groundbreaking or starting the project? So, you know, for example, everything goes through at the, you know, at town meeting this year. I assume road construction would start first. Is all of that reasonable? Can construction start in a way that would, you know, satisfy that request by August of 2024? October. Right? Oh, sorry, October. Yeah.
I'll take that one. We are fully ready after town vote to get a contract amendment in place with the town as quickly as possible. At that point, we can then contract with our subcontractors. It also depends on contracts with the road, but the way that we looked at this project last year is that we could work in conjunction at the same time. So we're not waiting for the road to go in. We just need access to our site. So getting groundbreaking, we're hoping to be in the ground by May, June, in all honesty, if everything aligns properly. We want to get the building enclosed as quickly as possible before the cold weather comes in, and that reduces overall what we call winter conditions on a project that has to run through the winter. So we have to heat in order to do drywall. If we get it enclosed, there's a lot less heat, you know, and things of that nature that we have to provide, shoveling, so on and so forth. So that is our goal.
Yes.
I have a question on the wetlands. There was a question, I think, on Chatter about the wetlands the other day, and are we destroying wetlands? And I'm asking this question knowing the answer, but there's got to be an expert in the room. I'm not an expert, but I was on a site walk a year or two ago, and I was shown where the wetlands were that are being changed, and they're in the middle of the cornfield. They're not the pond. So is there someone that can speak to what the wetlands are and how they will change? You win.
I'll do my best. I'm not a wetlands engineer. So there is a portion of the project that does impact what are officially wetlands. As part of the original part of the project, we had to get the whole site wetlands were identified. The part that it's not part of the building, it's where the parking area is where the official wetlands that we're disturbing are. And yes, that is currently in the cornfield. So just the way the site drains, that's an area of kind of standing water at times during the year. So that is the part that we would have to mitigate as part of the project. And we did review that with the state of New Hampshire, and they have approved the plan and everything. That's, I think, what Cindy alluded to with the permit. We got that permit at the end of 2019, and there's a 5-year timeline on that, so that's why that permit would expire at the end of 2024.
What the permit means from the state is it means that the wetlands issue is done. It's resolved. There's nothing else to be done on the wetlands issue. There was a lot of discussion in the last town meeting about drainage plans and extra maintenance costs and all those kind of things. The state doesn't give out permits easily. They give out permits when they are entirely satisfied that all of the regulations are met and all of the wetlands are being taken care of according to federal law under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and local statute and everything. So the wetlands issue is, and the site drainage, that's been resolved. And if people want to use an excuse to oppose the library, I think the wetlands is a poor choice because we have the permits already. It's resolved.
Is this on?
It's on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hold close.
Yep, I'm just remembering. Okay. On Mont Vernon chapter, there's been a number of comments regarding this purple house. Could you please explain to those who don't understand why the purple house is not a feasible construction site?
I am so glad you asked this question. I had a lot of fun looking at this. Okay, so here are the floor plans for the purple house. This is first and second floor. When this idea came up on Chatter and seemed to be getting some traction, I decided to study it and see what it would look like if we were to try to put our library there. So here's the deal with that house. Well, first of all, we would need a commercial elevator. That's an ADA requirement for accessibility. So, and the roof design is such that the third floor, the elevator couldn't go to the third floor. We don't have the head height for it. So it would, basically the elevator would hit the roof before you could actually step out of it. So third floor is off the table right off the bat. We could potentially put an elevator between first and second floors. Now, I'll offer this caveat, which is that I am not a structural engineer. So everything you're looking at here is the absolute best case scenario. Structural engineer could say, you cannot do this, but I am very good at space planning, if I do say so myself. And so I think that this is the appropriate location for the elevator. In any case, I did a design for the best possible use of this space, the space that's available, making some assumptions about what we might be able to do structurally. And it's really cute, but it actually doesn't offer anything additional. It's basically the same exact amount of collections that we have right now. Maybe 25% increase, same amount of seating, same area for children's. You don't really gain anything. And actually, Bonnie would really like me to acknowledge that there are a lot of security issues with this, like a young adult section that has no sight lines by staff and various other issues. And I guess you would gain a kitchen. I don't think we want to spend this amount of money just to gain a kitchen and no additional library. So it just doesn't make sense. And this is another good example of how ADA has changed everything. Because if you wanted to cram this to the gills, as a residence, you could. But there are really, really significant restrictions that we're under with the commercial code. And even a house that's nearly 4,000 square feet isn't going to get us a bigger library. So, does that answer that question?
To modify a house into a commercial building and get the same kind of energy efficiency that the new building has, and we're talking a lot about maintenance costs, so on and so forth, would be a lot. I'm sure the insulating value on the exterior walls, so on and so forth, like getting wires into, I'm assuming this building probably has lath and plaster, so the demo coming out of that. Does this building have hazardous materials? Asbestos, lead paint? You guys have children here. So, but lead paint can be just as expensive in a public building to mitigate, because you got to take all the trim off, all the siding off, like everything. And if the soil is tested for lead, that has to be mitigated as well. So I don't know a lot about this house, but in terms of efficiency, it would be a lot of money to get the same efficiency as the new building has. You would agree, right, Aaron? Okay.
Yeah, so in order to books, we basically have to shore up everything, correct? Correct, yeah, with steel or laminated veneer lumber. And then in addition to that, Bill, you can check me on this, change in use requires automatic update compliance with all codes, correct? So changing in use from residential to commercial, even if we weren't touching a thing, even if we weren't renovating a single thing, would make us have to comply with all codes, including energy code? Yes. So all new windows, insulation, new siding, it would be radically more expensive than the building that we're proposing to build right now, is the answer to that question. Do you have more to add?
So in the state of New Hampshire, they actually have adopted what they call the existing building code, which allows you to do alterations, renovations, and some phasing type processes. But it doesn't make the project any less expensive. And one of the key things, from many years in construction, I see here first off, is that when you have a home, standard code now is floor rating of 30 to 40 pounds per square foot. When you start in the libraries, you're at a minimum of 100 pounds per square foot. A home built in this age here, I would guess you're probably looking at floor loadings to 30 pounds per square foot. That's why those floors sag and dip and have all those neat features. So to try and get a building like this to 100 pounds per square foot, the cost would be astronomical. So that's something to really consider with this.
Yeah, you might as well tear it down and start new, but here you go.
The other concern that popped up was every floor needs at least a minimum of one staff member. No floor should go unattended.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, this would actually increase staffing needs, so that's an additional cost that the taxpayers would be fronting.
Okay, so more questions? Yes. Don't be shy. This is good.
I'm kind of jumping around based on whatever was talked about last. So change of use, back to the existing library building. When the new library is built, if that building is to be used for any other town purposes, shuffling during other renovations and stuff, will that trigger needing to be brought up to ADA compliance? And who holds that burden? Is that the town that is then responsible for bringing that building up to code for a different use?
Hello again. Anytime you change the purpose of a building, all these old buildings are grandfathered under ADA as long as we don't change the purpose for which they're used. The second we change the purpose, ADA comes into applying. So yes, we would have to modify it. We would have to make it accessible for the disabled, and that would be a town responsibility.
Okay. Yes.
So can you sell it, the existing library?
Town can sell any asset. That would have to be a decision made by the town. There's nothing stopping us, essentially. I'll give it to you.
Maybe there is.
In 2015 and through 2017, there was a study committee that looked at all the town facilities and everything. And the unique thing, and actually the recommendation to buy this building from the library came from that committee. And the reason for that is because the library was owned by the trust, but built on town land. But the septic system is across the street on another piece of land. So to sell this property would be very difficult because you do not have the land to put a septic system on this site. So the septic system would still have to maintain across the street, but then it would be on town land. So you would have a privately owned building sharing property with the town for their septic system use. So I would say that, to be actually able to sell this property, it would be a very difficult task.
is this on? Okay. Are we sure it would be a change in use going from a town library to town offices? Wouldn't that be the same use? No?
It depends on what the town ultimately decides the use of the building is. If they're going to use it for meeting space, no. If they're going to use it for permanent town offices, yes, you would change, because what you do is a library is a type of an assembly use, A3, I believe, and when you go to town offices, you go into a business type use. So could you do some offices in there and still keep meeting room and keep the A3 standard? Sure, you could absolutely do that. It all comes down to how you design and intend to use the building. On temporary uses for when they're renovating the town hall, no, that wouldn't constitute a change of use, because it's on a temporary plan. The other thing to consider is that as we look at years ahead, looking at the town hall, the reason the study committee recommended purchasing this building was the added cost of renting office trailers. And where would you park office trailers while you're trying to rent the town hall? And this building made a lot of sense to be able to move town offices into it if the town owned that property, to actually accommodate the next phase of the renovations for the town hall, to try and save that. I think. Zoe, did you still have another question? Okay, super. Yes.
Could we possibly allocate space for like a scout type? There's a really huge Girl Scout, Boy Scout community here in Mont Vernon, and we get messy sometimes. I'm a leader of a troop, and we're constantly asking the fire department, knock, knock, can we have meetings here? We're not the only ones. It happens all the time. And sometimes I feel like a brand new library would be a little too messy for stuff that Scouts could do. So if that's just an idea, not an office space, but something for kids.
Miss Joanne's still here. She's like the queen of glitter and glue. And the programming room in the new library is really anticipated to be used by lots of kids doing lots of things, and many of them will involve glitter and glue. So in selecting the finishes for that area and the flooring, that was taken into account. So it is very much my hope that the Scouts will use that room as well.
There's a kitchen right next door. You can clean up just about anything. Yep, baker cookies. And, any sort of meetings can be there, political meetings, non-political meetings. The whole idea is to create a space for the whole community.
So with this new meeting room, you guys are talking about a general usage room for town of Mont Vernon. To me, a lot of this project has sounded like you're adding like a whole rec department area, because you do so many, we'll just say, non-typical library activities. So is this still going to be the Dayland Memorial Library? Is it going to be a Mont Vernon Recreation Department Center? Is it going to be a community, like a community center? And so with all that, and then is it still going to be called the Dayland Memorial Library? I'm just curious about that part of it too.
Okay, who would like to field this?
The terms of the will under which the library is managed by the trust requires the name to be the Dayland Memorial Library in perpetuity.
And we wouldn't want it any other way. I mean, Sophia Dayland is an heroine for what she built for our community.
I've been a librarian for actually the Dayland Memorial Library. Then I've been a librarian for the schools. And now I'm actually a curriculum coordinator, which means that I help school districts with all of their curriculum, libraries as well as math and English, science, social studies. Libraries have evolved. And libraries are not just about books. And this is not a Mont Vernon thing. This is a national trend thing. This is actually international. And I go to library conferences. I do a lot of studying about libraries. It's my job. And so this is not just a Mont Vernon trend. We're just following what is happening all across the country. And this is really good for our children. It's great for our community. And I think that what you can see now, and it's also being reported, is that our country is suffering, our world is suffering from isolation and loneliness. And what the library is doing is helping bring us people together. Libraries are about learning, lifelong learning, community. It is filling a void. And that's not just Mont Vernon. So I hear what you're saying, but I think what I'm hearing you say is that the library is moving beyond its scope. And that's not really true. What we're doing is doing what libraries are doing all around the country.
I just had a meeting with the in Southern New Hampshire. We had the holiday party at the library. You'll be surprised to hear that we had to move everything out of the whole area to get 15 library directors in there. But the state librarian was there, and I asked him the question about calling it a rec center, and he cautioned me to absolutely not change the name of it to library because we would automatically knock ourselves out of grant opportunities. I don't think we hear a lot of grant opportunities for community centers, but certainly there are millions of dollars of grants out there for libraries. So please hold the name library. And also, we haven't been able to apply for a lot of grants because we're not ADA compatible right now. So the American Library Association begged me, they have millions of dollars in grant money right now to apply for grants, but I had to not apply because I'm not ADA compatible. If I promise to host every single event under the tent, I can apply, but weather does not permit. So I would caution anyone to change the name to a rec center or a community center in any way because you're going to knock us out of thousands of dollars of future grants. And we are grant winners. We have proven repeatedly that when we apply for grants, we receive them. So I am counting on those grants to reduce the cost of the appropriation every year. It's okay to be a library.
So are there more questions? I know we're getting close to the time frame that we wanted to do. Yes, there's time for another question.
My question is, I represent a mom of young kids, and it seems like that, no offense, but I think, a lot of us younger people are up against a lot of scary costs with raising young kids. And I know my husband gets really sketched out with taxes, and he's constantly thinking, very nervous right now. That coffee's kicking in. Just give me a moment. I did not call all of you old. I'm thinking more or less. There is a more appropriate way to say that. But what is being done to cliff note everything that makes sense to me sitting here right now, missing a night with my children? What is being done to actually expedite all these facts and to really sell it? Because I do represent the generation that goes, that's a rec center. We have the internet. We have this. We have that. We have all these other things. I'm not spending that money. I hear it left and right. I'm just wondering what we're doing to counteract that in a really horribly questioned way.
So I think the first place I'd like to start in responding to that, like, what are we doing to increase the value to the community? And the first thing was raise an awful lot of money. And it's important. There's been a lot of discussion about the cost of the library. I think we need to talk about the benefits of the library. We live in an intense commercial society, and there's not that many places where a mom can go on a rainy day and bring their kids and not expect to spend any money. And I was raised by a single mom, and I remember spending a lot of time at public libraries because that's where we could be entertained outside of the vortex of our own house and not have to spend any money. So you're talking about that I went to Giorgio's with my family, and it cost more than this appropriation for the entire year for the average house in town, right? For one dinner. And so we're talking about a fairly reasonable amount of money, and the reason is because your fellow citizens in this town worked for years to cover 2/3 of it. The Sophia Dalen Trust, the Conyers bequest, the National Endowment for the Humanities Grant. That is where we're not talking about lowering the price or talking about value. We're lowering the price one day at a time, one event at a time, with our own money, and we're bringing it down to something so that the community can afford it. And that's what we've done. And so, it's hard to find a similar project in New Hampshire that has 2/3 of its money raised and accounted for. Where we're going to the community and we're saying, we're not asking you for $6 million, we're asking you for 1/3 of the total cost, because we've done all this work over years to plan for this event and make this happen. So, look at the value side of the equation. How many people here have consistent electricity in the winter? You're at home, you're working from home, your internet and your electricity go down. Go to the library. I talked to the Wilton librarian today about the question about building size and when their library was built. And she says there's people who work here all day long because their house doesn't have power, or for this reason or that reason. And there's so much value created by this library and the way that we use libraries right now. Interlibrary loan to internet access to community programs. You got to try out the cookbook club, because people in this town, they can cook. It is delicious. The wonderful programs that Joanne does for our children. A week of childcare during spring break for $150 a student with lunch included? Where can you get a childcare value like that? Well, you can get it at the Mont Vernon Library. And we're space limited, not imagination limited, right? So this solves that problem. We're trying to do something that's enormously hard in the United States. We're trying to go back to the town and get people to change their minds. And hopefully some of the stuff we've talked about tonight can do that, where people go and say, well, I thought it was going to cost this and it's less. I thought it was going to look like this and gets less. They didn't change the design, but now I understand why, because it doesn't actually benefit the town to change the design. And then the other thing is, just remember all the fantastic work that the people in this room have done to bring that price down. Because asking you for $6 million would be ridiculous, but we're only asking you for $2 million. And we're trying to bring that down every single day.
I understand.
All right.
But a lot of people that are voting that work full time and have young kids, they don't, and it looks scary, and they immediately shut it down. That's where I think you're losing a lot of the younger generation in the town. That is growing. We are growing. There's how many more people.
I will be happy to talk to every one of them individually, because I believe in this project, and I believe this project has especially great value for young families, and especially also great value for young families that are still worried about taxes, because you can save more than you'll spend by utilizing the library.
Thank you for asking that question. It's a really important question, and it was clear why you asked it and what your perspective was. But it's a challenge, the way that we communicate now. A lot of it happens on social media. It's really difficult to talk about the real facts and do it in a way that is fast enough for the amount of information that we have to process on a day-to-day basis, just being who we are, just living in this world, bombarded by information constantly, and no one has time to really dig in deep and understand. So, here you go.
Unless you're Christine and you spent the last 4 days dissecting the Purple House. So one of the things I want to say is that everything we've heard tonight is really helpful. It's great to hear people's real perspectives, and it's hard to pull that off of Facebook, honestly. And I really appreciate the people who have spoken with emotion about their own real stories. And I would encourage you, if you think that you can help us sell it and you would like to, send me a note, cindy@mvlcf.org, and we will, if nothing else, use you to review things that we've written to help us make sure we're hitting the right notes. I'm really grateful that the team has expanded this year. Amanda Young, who's in the audience, has helped us on a number of things with some grant writing. Christine and Larry are relatively new to the team. They're all way newer to town than I am, and maybe a little younger. Yeah, okay, a lot younger. We were referring to Christine as my new baby sister until I figured out I was old enough to be her mother. It was very distressing. But people have different perspectives, and it really helps to have more people on the team. What makes sense to me as a message may not hit a young mom at all. It's been a long time since I was one. So if you're interested in helping us, we'd love to have you. Yes. Stacy's giving me great advice from the front row here. She said, another thing you can do is talk to your neighbors, because a lot of these things get sold, not on Facebook, not even in meetings like this, but in one-on-one conversations about why you think it's important, why you're supporting it, how your questions were asked. If you get questions that you don't know the answers to, again, Cindy@mvlcf.org, and I'll make sure you get the answers. I do think that this is a very important thing for the town that a lot of people have worked on for a very long time, and it would be wonderful if you all could help us make it a reality for the town.
And I also think I was just going to continue that we know there are still questions, and every question is valid and every concern is valid. And we have a listening session this Saturday at the library, and nobody should feel badly about having questions or concerns about this new library. And there are no bad questions. So please, if you're talking to neighbors or you're talking to friends, or there are still questions in your heart, please do have them, because we all have questions, and we all, trust me, I have sat in plenty of meetings, and I think my friends get mad at me because I'm like, why aren't we doing this, or why? And all questions are valid. So please continue to ask, because that's very important. Encourage your neighbors as well.
That's a really great point. I mean, I loved the Purple House debate this week because it just solidified the concept, like, oh, okay, this is why we are going this direction.
To respond to your question about communications, that in fact has been a source of great frustration for the Mount Vernon Library Charitable Foundation. We have on our website FAQs, and nearly, not all, but nearly all of the questions that were asked tonight are answered on that website in print. But people aren't gravitating towards that website. You can see we're recording tonight's meeting, and we're going to go through this and bolster those FAQs. We're going to bolster those FAQs to capture any questions that have arisen that we haven't answered yet. So if you want to help, one way is when you hear questions, let people know, hey, they may have answered that one on the FAQs. Go to the mvlcf.org website and take a look at the frequently asked questions. There's probably a carefully considered answer there. And we are going to great lengths to make sure that they're facts, not opinions.
Okay. Any more questions? I think we're almost at 2 hours total duration here. So, okay, excellent. Yes, we love them.
So this is now comments, but not to bring down the mood. But so we just heard a lot of that. We talked about library listening sessions and other ways to get people out. Honestly, that's tough. You're not going to get the people that you need to change sides to vote on this project with listening sessions held at the library. And honestly, the tone on Facebook, on Chatter, a number of people asked very legitimate questions. And to put it nicely, they were very dismissed for being anonymous or other things. I don't think you're communicating with people maybe the way you think you are. And things like those frequently asked questions and other things on the website, those are very, like you said, well thought out answers. They don't always come across as credible. They come across as a sales pitch for the library. And people see that and they choose not to do that. And there was certainly discussion about tonight saying, why would I go? I'm going to see the same presentation I've heard over and over, and I'm going to get elusive answers. I'm not going to get the answers. There is a credibility gap. And I think you got to pay attention to that. and try and close that. And even, some of this recent discussion, again, the tone comes across as, we understand it's expensive, we're raising a lot of money, but it's not that expensive. It is expensive. This is a very big ask of the town, and saying things like, it's only a little more than $2 million, again, loses that credibility, because this is a project that in one way or another costs more than that. I know there's lots of nuance in who owns the road or what parts go into it, but $2 million is not what brings this building to fruition and opens the library. There are more costs involved. And so the more times you say a number that isn't the final cost to bring all this there, the more people you lose along the way. And so all I can say is be really careful with, how you listen to people over the next coming weeks. It's the listening part that's really important. Even I was very frustrated earlier tonight. The first couple of questions, I'm not gonna, your question was very good about what has changed in this plan and the square footage, and did you listen to people last year? And we got a long presentation that didn't answer that question. And that's a very similar outcome to other questions being asked. I tried to, pass along some of the questions, didn't get through them all tonight that have shown up. But really try and answer questions if this is a project that you want to go to fruition. You guys are the stewards of this project. A lot of people have put a lot of money, a lot of trust in other things in this. And frankly, I still consider myself a reluctant supporter. I'm somebody who wants a new library, but I'm not fully sold. And I do have concerns, and I'm really concerned that it's not going to go through. And if it doesn't go through, it's because of those issues. This is a project that has a lot of, merit, and I think is, the fundraising is incredible. But a lot of people, they're just not there. And maybe it's because it's expensive, maybe it's because they don't understand the project. But there's still work to be done. And, honestly, there's not a lot of people in this room that are not supporters of this project. I don't think the people that you saw on Facebook making, comments that you didn't like, you dismissed, whatever else, they're not going to show up to this. And they're not going to show up to a listening session at the library. That feels very much like going onto your turf to hear your spiel. That's not the way you're going to reach those people.
Those are really good input. We appreciate it. I honestly felt like we asked the question about the building size and why it hadn't changed. So I don't necessarily understand your frustration on that particular question. We weren't evasive. We just said that it hadn't changed and why.
No, I honestly feel like I had to ask that question in very explicit terms. Has there been changes to the plan? I think they're deep in that discussion. You might have been able to infer that there wasn't changes, but the question was a very straightforward question of, is this library the same size as the presentation last year? And the answer was a justification for the size of the building. It was not a simple, no, okay. The project has not changed from last year.
Okay.
I have to respond to that. The question was, what has changed since last year? That's the actual exact question. So
you can correct me over and over. What I'm trying to say is that the way these questions are being answered are probably not reaching the audience that you need
and
to
I
reach.
completely agree with you. I think the challenge here is that if this conversation is only going to happen on Facebook, it's going to be very hard to communicate clear factual information because, and I agree with you that there are people being rude and dismissive on both sides. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find a response from any one of the people who are actually a member of the committee or the librarians, any of those people responding in that way at all. And
So I would like to say that there are people in this room, on these committees, officers of the town, other people who made very off-putting responses on there.
on Facebook?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think the challenging thing here, and you can take this from me if you want to, with tone on Facebook, you are going to infer the worst possible interpretation of the person who's on the opposing side from you. So I think sometimes people are being sincere and it's taken as sarcasm and vice versa.
Yeah, so these are people that I would consider on my side, and I'm honestly worried they are blowing the project.
I completely, 100% agree with you. Agree with you completely on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very frustrating. I see things. Is my husband still here? Every once in a while, he posts something, and I think, really, really, everyone has had that experience. One of the things that they always say is that face-to-face communication is the best way to communicate, which is why we're hosting this meeting tonight. It's why we're doing the listening sessions. And I hear what you're saying about the venue. I forget the statistics. I'm not in communications, but they talk about the fact that you lose a lot when you go from face-to-face to over the phone. And over the phone, you can still hear my tone of voice. You can tell if I'm laughing. If I'm face-to-face, you can see if I'm smiling. You can't see any of that stuff on Facebook. And they haven't invented a sarcasm emoji, which maybe is good, maybe it's bad, or font for sarcasm. So I hear everything you're saying, and certainly it is not anybody's intention to be condescending, to belittle anyone. I totally agree with what Amy said. There are no bad questions. I just think that we collectively, you say that you're a reluctant supporter. Help us turn you into a fervent supporter. Help us communicate so that we get the message across. Because this is a really good project that a ton of people have spent a lot of time on. And many of them have done it not because I'm going to spend the rest of my life hanging out at the library using the space. I'm doing it because I grew up in a very small town and I read every single book in the library. My parents could not afford books to buy. And to me, this is a legacy for me to leave behind to the people who live in this town long after I'm gone. So I would love for all of you to help us better communicate this message so that it doesn't get lost in translation and that we don't have well-meaning surrogates out there who choose the wrong tone of voice in a message and turn you off. We definitely don't want that. Amy?
I've been round along enough that I hosted one of the living room talks, if anyone remembers when the fire station was being built. And it was in my living room, and the fire guys came and
Because you were their best customer.
because my chicken coop burned down, and they came. And so anyways, they came and had a talk, and I invited all my neighbors and friends. And so I'm sitting back here and I'm hearing what you're saying, and if anybody would be willing to have a living room talk and invite people, because it is very hard to have a discussion with Anonymous, because I don't know who Anonymous is, and maybe it is my best friend and I don't know that, or maybe it's somebody who I've never met. I was the person who said we needed to go to the dump because I'm always at the dump, and that is a great place to see people, but it's hard to engage and it's cold and nobody really wants to stop. But if anybody is willing to volunteer for their living room, just pick up one room and we can go back with the living room talks. And they are a great time and opportunity to get questions answered. And I'm hearing you, not defensively, but to get that answered. And if any of you remember, I thought it was an effective way to get that message out. And we have plenty of time, December, January, February, March, we got time to do it. And it would be a way, but it's most effective when it's not just team library. It can't be all the same. So it's only effective if it's people we don't know. So just, if you want to volunteer, please do.
Okay. Okay, you can hear me. So my question for you is, how I saw on Facebook, and it was horrible, I agree. How do we answer those questions? Where do we answer those questions? I mean, you scrolled through Facebook and you asked those questions. If we are to answer those questions, we have the same problem that you're talking about. How do we do this?
Yeah, the biggest thing I can say is I agree. Facebook is very tricky. And, the questions being asked covered the full spectrum from, nonsense. Clearly they were not, well-intentioned, to very legitimate questions, many of the ones that were asked tonight. And I think regardless as to what the question was, who asked it, or how it was asked, it was met with a response along the lines of, come to a listening session, come to the December 6th meeting here. And that response depending on what side you're on, you either receive that as, yeah, that's going to be a great place to get the information, or no way, I'm going to, be attacked. I'm going to hear the same things I've heard. I'm not going to get an accurate answer to my question. So all I can say is, without dismissing questions that are clearly nonsense or clearly bad intentioned, if legitimate questions come up, for example, the anonymous thread, there was a lot of well thought out questions. Those are many of the same questions that came up tonight. Those are answerable questions with straightforward answers, and honestly, skip the sales pitch on an answer to those questions. Putting the facts out there. Again, I know that's a term that gets used a lot, but I feel, and I think others do as well, facts is often a code word for sales pitch in this context.
Can we skip the comments?
Here, Jill, let me just.
Oh.
So one of the problems with Facebook as an algorithm and a medium is it's really hard to find the questions in there and go back and find something. We all in the last few days have had discussions where someone says, did you see what someone asked? Did you see what someone answered? And I can't even find it. So it's as a medium to try to get these out. I took that whole long list of questions from Anonymous. We're working on just exactly what you're describing. I am trying to figure out what to do with it when we get the answer. Do we post it? Yeah, right. So help me figure out what to do with it when we get it done. We're working on it. And I agree, a lot of those questions are either already in the FAQs. I hear what you're saying about it as a sales pitch. It is a website for a project. Right. But in this case, a lot of them are a one-sentence answer or a reference to something else. And we're definitely working on it. That was only posted a couple days ago. We were working on getting ready for this, so it has not escaped our notice that the questions are still out there. I know that you guys have given us a lot of attention for a long time tonight, so I want to be respectful and let you get out of here before it's too much later. But I really do appreciate all the input. Did you have a thought? One more.
And my other comment, just a comment, is that when the meeting was held last year, I had to park down the bottom of the hill down here, and by the time I got to the school, I thought I was going to have a heart attack.
We're thinking about valet parking.
I was going to ask about, is there a possibility of shuttle parking or something like that?
That's on our list, actually. We were talking about valet parking, but the idea of using high school kids turned out not to be something that we thought people's insurance companies would really appreciate, but we're looking at it. John, can you answer the question about leasing?
There, as you know, we have many older buildings that some of them need a lot of renovation. I understand your question about. There will be a plan put together. Actually, I don't know how many of you know this, but we have a strategic now wrapping up its version of a capital improvements plan, which basically looks at all the town's major obligations over the next 15, 20 years. Part of the plan, when and if the library passes, we build a new library, and we start looking at the next steps to be taken with the other buildings, renovating, fixing, doing everything we have to do. All contingencies will be looked at, including possibly, and it has been brought up before, possible sale of the building, possible lease of the building. That is all possible, and there will be discussion. I guarantee you that.
Okay, I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to plant this seed. I think the old library would be a fantastic pub as soon as we figure out the restroom situation. Thank you all. Again, my email address is cindy@mvlcf.org. I have a couple of other ones, but that's the easiest one. Don't hesitate to reach out directly. Oh, CINDY, the way they used to spell it in the olden days. Thank you all for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming. If you have more questions, you can come and ask us, and I'll still be here for sure.
Is the mic off?